Yes. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to all the participants. And we welcome Professor Yukti Sharma. She is a great academician and will be speaking on the National Education Policy in Light of Inclusion. So we are waiting just for 2 minutes so that Professor Dhananjay Joshi also joins. He is facing some technical issue. So just within 2 minutes, we'll begin the session. So in the meantime, I just want to tell all the participants that we will have the session first, and then the queries and the any queries or any questions or any suggestions will take after the session. And I think after 1 hour or I think nearby 4:30, we will take all the questions. And I think you can write the questions in the chat box. So then ma'am will take the questions one by one. Is it fine, ma'am?
Absolutely. Absolutely fine, Dr. Anjali.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. So I think now we can begin the session because I got the response. Sir is not still able to join. Okay, so we can formally begin the program. So welcome to all the participants and Professor Yukti Sharma as a resource person. We welcome you to our university, Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University. And welcome to this, the second session of the faculty development program. Today only in the morning we had the inaugural session and we welcome you, ma'am. And before we begin the formal session, I request Samaira and Radhika to just play the Kulgeet of our university. So we'll begin the program with the Kulgeet of our university.
लाएंगे हम सच का सवेरा, गुरु कृपा का होगा बसेरा। विद्या की लो और लगन से हट जाएगा यह तुम घनेरा। इस धरा से आसमां तक हम बना ले अपनी ज्ञान गरिमा। अपने श्रम से कौशलों से हम बढ़ा ले अपनी मान महिमा। फैल जाए अपनी सुगंध हर दिशा में, प्रगति पथ पर ख्याति अपने हो हवा में। बादलों से ऊंची अपनी उड़ान, हम करेंगे विश्व का कल्याण। हम इंद्रप्रस्थ की अंजुमन, हम इंद्रप्रस्थ को
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Banipreet.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, you are audible. I think you have joined as a attendee link, maybe. Uh,
Yeah, that's why the problem is coming. I am trying to speak, but I could not able to give my thanks to Professor Yukti. So
Okay.
without having much more glitches, the WebEx has some issues, maybe because Google Meet certainly do not have such kind of glitches, but WebEx is generally from laptops. So so maybe I'm in my gratitude to Professor Yukti. Yukti is from CIE, and I've seen that she's doing very nice work, and she's also doing very nice job in pandemic. I've seen her webinars and seminars also, and I appreciate her for all her endeavors. This is the FDP in which are all the scholars and our universities fellow from our department and our affiliated colleges. Yukti, more than 100 faculties are there right now. So I believe that this would be a very fruitful and enriching session. And I also thank you for sparing your valuable time in spite of your very busy schedule, which I got to know in morning. Professor S.P. Singh, Department of Political Science, Delhi University, was the chief guest, and our Director Academic Affairs, Professor P.C. Sharma, was the guest of honor.
Okay.
And this subject is very cordially, I believe that it is very important for all of us, because we all are dealing with the policy of education. So when the
Right.
idea came to our mind that which area we should take our FDP, because this is punchline for our next 20-30 years, the roadmap ahead, which we have given a title, New Policy of Education, a roadmap ahead. So we would like to know your views, because policy is there, but we do not know how to implement it. Because in last 25 years, we have so many policies, but thing is that the implementation is more important. Because someone said, तालीम का शोर इतना, तहजीब पर जोर इतना, बरकत नहीं होती, सिर्फ नीयत की खराबी है. So कैसे हम इस पे कामयाब हों, कैसे वो रोड मैप मिले, क्योंकि कहीं ऐसा ना हो जाए कि ये भी एक लाइब्रेरी की शेल्फ में आकर के रह जाए और हमारी जनरेशन सिर्फ इसको पढ़ें. मैं समझता हूं कि आपके आने से मौसम बहुत खुशगवार हो गया है, एंड situation from with you and your expertise will more enlighten to our listeners, our viewers, and this FDP having very vibrant kind of mixed kind of audience from not only of India but some of from the abroad have also joined. And this is very important day. It's I think inaugural. After inaugural, you are having the first speaker. So I wish you all the best. And dear participants, I believe that you must ask some questions, write down, and Professor Yukti will also clarify your doubt. Thank you, Anjali, for calling Yukti on our behalf, and we all are very now ready to hear from Professor Yukti. Over to you, Anjali, and over to Professor Yukti. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Dhananjay, for your all kind words. And really, you have well said, that NEP is right now the most important topic. And I really congratulate from my core of my heart to you and to Dr. Anjali for organizing an FDP program on NEP. And
Thank you so much.
and also inviting me for sharing my ideas and also learning from all of you and all the participants. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
madam.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Before we begin the formal session, I just want to introduce Professor Yukti Sharma. I take proud privilege in welcoming Professor Yukti Sharma. So Dr. Yukti is professor at Department of Education and academic secretary at the Institute of Lifelong Learning, University of Delhi. She has done MSc Botany and MD, in which she was the gold medalist from the University of Delhi. Ma'am is involved in teaching and guiding research in the areas of inclusive education, science education, environmental education, giftedness, and creativity at the department. She has conducted several research projects which are awarded by NCERT New Delhi and has presented papers in national and international conferences. Ma'am has, to her credit, several publications in acclaimed international journals. She has authored textbooks, edited books, contributed chapters on education and science education for the renowned publishers such as Macmillan, Pearson, and Sage. She has also contributed towards MOOCs and in open educational resources and in the review committees of several organizations such as NCTE, NIOS, IGNOU, NCRT, and CBSE. She has also been invited to various lectures in the faculty development program, seminars, webinars, and in-service programs for teachers from various universities and organizations across the country, such as Tata Institute of Social Sciences, University of Calcutta, Maharishi Dayanand University, Rohtak, Assam University, Silchar, and many more. We welcome you, ma'am, to this faculty development program. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Anjali, for the kind introduction. So now I have the permission to begin the session.
Yes, ma'am, sure.
So I'll just share my presentation. Give me a minute.
Yeah, please.
Yes, I hope it's visible, no? So
Yes, it's visible.
a very good afternoon once again to Professor Joshi, Dr. Anjali, and all the participants of FDP. As I was discussing with Dr. Anjali, that this platform is able to accommodate around 100 participants, and today we also have around 100 participants across different universities. But the only thing is that the participants won't be able to speak, but you could write your queries or write your ideas in the question answer box. So I would definitely like it to be an interactive session, and which I would open in between so that you can write something in the chat box, in the question answer box. And this is how we'll progress. Now coming on to the topic, NEP 2020 is one area which has been widely discussed. I mean, Professor Joshi has very aptly said that it's a policy which has come after 30 years, an education policy after 30 years. And also the previous policy had its own limitations in the sense, as he said, that, you know, the implementation was far different from what it was envisioned. So that's another challenge that our education policies have faced. And of course, you know, we feel that this policy should not get into the same trap. So when I was, Dr. Anjali told me about this FDP program and these deliberations and discussions that they wanted around this policy, my area of specialization happens to be inclusion. I have been working in this area from the last 20 years. And so therefore it is like kind of a passion to me. And hence I took the liberty of, you know, limiting it to the perspective of inclusion. So that's how the phrase perspective of inclusion comes in the title. The other part of the title, examining the ideological stance and vision of NEP 2020. This part of the title was, when I look at the entire policy, I see that, this is my experience from the perspective of inclusion, I see there is a common stance which is being taken from the first chapter to the last, from the across the 66 pages into which the policy has been framed in. And so I always wanted that we need to understand which stance the policy is talking from. Because specifically in case of inclusion, the stances of the earlier policies have been different. I mean, this is my idea and my analysis. Maybe you may differ, and I would like to hear that also. So that is why I thought that we could begin our discussion with the ideological stance. And ideological stance is also important because it's the ideological stance that gives you a conviction towards the policy and also how we implement the policy. So The first part of my presentation would be talking about the stance. The second part talks about the vision. Now, vision in the policy regarding inclusion is given in two parts. One majorly is on school education, which is the chapter 6. And the other vision which the policy gives is on higher education, which is equally important, but has been ignored in the past years. So that's how we would progress in our presentation. So let's first discuss the ideological stance. Now, when we look at the policy from the beginning, on the page 6 only, the policy has very explicitly given some fundamental principles. When I read these principles, immediately what came into my mind were the kind of fundamental principles which have been given in the Constitution. And as soon as we talk in terms of the word fundamental, whether it's fundamental rights or fundamental duties, as we say in the Constitution, and here it's written as fundamental principles, the degree of commitment increases. It shows, that the policy is committed to these principles which it has listed. Not committed, but at least it aims to commit itself to these fundamental principles. So listing down the fundamental principles in the beginning also is reflecting the stance that it's taking across the various sections of the policy. And in those fundamental principles, 3 points that I felt were aligned to the idea of inclusion was, one was respect for diversity and respect for the local context in all curriculum, pedagogy, and policy, always keeping in mind that education is a concurrent subject. Second was full equity and inclusion as the cornerstone of all educational decisions to ensure that all students are able to thrive. All students are able to thrive in the education system. And the third is the extensive use of technology in teaching and learning, removing language barriers, increasing access for Divyang students, and education planning and management. Now, these principles are very different from the previous policy that we have looked at. Now, if we are aware of inclusion, I've been told that most of you are from education background. And so if you could write some of your ideas of inclusion, what do you think inclusion is, then maybe from that we can compare that what is the policy talking about and what are we thinking about, because we are the present practitioners in the field of education. So how do we practice inclusion? What do we understand from inclusion? That is very important to understand what is the policy saying about inclusion. So if in the question answer box, where all of you have written also your greetings, if there you can just quickly write one phrase or a few words that come across your mind when you hear the word inclusion. That would help us to take the discussion further. We are just waiting for your responses. Any phrase, anything that comes to your mind, because inclusion is one area that cuts across all levels of education. Whether it's school education or higher education, it cuts across all disciplinary areas. And therefore, we all are somewhere related to the idea of inclusion. Yes, Dr. Priya has written inclusion is including everyone in the mainstream. Dr. Seema has also written Inclusion, Dr. Sonia has also written, inclusion is not just about legal provisions, but the mind which is ready to accept diversity. Yes, very well said. Dr. Seema has written including all. Rana Saeed has written to include all the students on the basis of equity. Okay, to include all the students on the basis of equity, right? Understanding, that's very important, understanding that we all are coming from different contexts, we all are coming from different backgrounds, and the kind of opportunities and the kind of the resources that we have access to might be different, and therefore the idea of equity. Accepting and appreciating diversity, right, Dr. Seema? Dr. Shalini has written, it's an attitude which looks diversity as an asset rather than a liability. Inclusion means including everyone without any discrimination, giving equal opportunities. That has been written by Dr. Namrata. So I think there are many responses we have got, and these all are very valid. I'm so happy to see that you all are talking about inclusion in these terms, in the terms of diversity, in the terms of asset, in terms of appreciating diversity, in terms of equity, understanding that we all are not at the same place. We all are located at different levels, and therefore our needs are going to be different from here onwards. Inclusion is to strengthen general education system. That is a very important point, because till now, you know, a general education system has somewhere kept itself separate from the special education system. And that is why the first comment which was given, it had the word mainstream, bringing everybody into the mainstream. So the idea of mainstream itself had, you know, the idea that there are two different streams running and one is better than the other. And that's why we somewhere stopped using the word mainstreaming and we started using the word general education, which an education which encompasses everybody, which includes everybody. So I think all your ideas which you have written is what the policy is talking about. All these ideas that you all have mentioned is what policy is also looking towards. But the point of contention was that till now, from the last 30 years, the policy on which we have been operating, the 1986 policy, also talked about inclusion, but it was talking about inclusion in terms of integration. And that is where a major difference came. So integration all the more had created these two streams of education, which was, one was the mainstream education and the other one was the special education, and where the mainstream education was considered better than the somehow better than the special education, you know, irrespective of the kind of pedagogies and resources which were available in two kinds of streams. And now the researches are happening, how one was better than other or which one is better than other. So there are now many debates around this idea, but there was an implied understanding that the mainstream education was better. Anyhow, we are removing those dichotomies and coming down to one system of education, which is general education system, which is this policy is completely in favor of, that we should have only one system of education, whether at the school level or at the higher education level. There is no mainstream, there is no special schools. All schools are general schools. All higher education institutions are higher education systems. And there would be no parallel system of education which could be called as a special school or a special organization or a vocational organization altogether. That even if the vocational education is being discussed at length in the policy, it is not an alternative to the general education system. It is another education system which has a purpose of its own, not as a compensatory mechanism for the general education system, whether at the school level or at the high level. So therefore, there are no alternatives to a general education system, which is the first thing. So if we do not provide what this policy is envisioning, if we do not provide any alternative system of education, automatically we would have only one system of education, and each child or each learner, whether it's school education or higher education, should be a part of that particular system. So with this, the idea of diversity also is equally celebrated in the policy, because it is this one policy which has talked about the diversity which is existing in the Indian context. It talks about all kinds of diversities which are existing, not simply the Divyang, but also in terms of geographical identities, caste identities, class identities. So it has acknowledged every kind of difference which is available in terms of diversity in the Indian education system. Acknowledging is the first step towards respecting and accepting. If you see the previous policies, this kind of an acknowledgement, which is based on empirical evidences, has not been given in the earlier policy. And this was the reason that this policy took time to evolve, also took time to be written and drafted also, because it had a lot of work going on behind the policy also. Because whatever was said in the policy had some kind of a basis to it, or at many places, the policy is seeking that research should be done in order to establish these facts. And therefore, whatever facts and whatever information is being given in the policy, all that is empirically established. The other point which says full equity and inclusion, it again, what just now we had got in the chat box establishes this idea that we require to act on the idea of equity, because people coming from different contexts are not standing at the same situation. They are not having the access of resources and opportunities in the same way, and hence the journey of each individual begins from a different place, because they have a different context. So it is giving due acknowledgement to the equity and also to inclusion. Whereas in the previous policies, a lot of emphasis was given on integration. And we all know how integration is different from inclusion. Inclusion and integration, the major difference between the two major differences: in inclusion, the onus is completely on the state and the institutions of the state. So it comes as a mandate. In integration, we know that there is no mandate on the state. There is no onus on the state to ensure any kind of participation or inclusion or access to opportunities. The second major thing is that in integration, the individuals are made to fit into the institutions, because the institutions have no responsibility to change themselves. Whereas inclusion, we know that the institutions have to change. The society has to change. As many of you have written, that inclusion is removal of barriers from the society, from all kinds of barriers, whether it's physical barriers, attitudinal barriers, barriers in one's thinking, barrier in terms of the perceptions we have about others. So it's basically the removal of those barriers. So where are these barriers getting removed? They are being removed from the society and its institutions. So it becomes the responsibility of the society and the institutions, and of course the state, which has to ultimately execute it, the government. So therefore, there is a big difference from the previous policy, where we were operating at the level of integration, and the onus was, the responsibility was only with the individuals and not with the state or the society as such. And the very third important stance which the policy takes is the use of technology. The policy is very implicit in saying that technology will have and is having a major role in removing many of the barriers, making the educational resources, opportunities accessible for the Divyang students, and even to the students who are in the remote areas. So programs like MOOCs, which are already been started in the policy, through the policy it has been already started and has been again acknowledged in the policy also. Those are serving many students from the remote areas, such as, and also the schemes like academic bank credits, where even if you leave the course for some reason, even if an individual leaves the course, can rejoin the course at some other point of time and would get the credit for the previous part of the course, whether did it for a diploma or did it for a certificate level course. So such academic bank credits are ensuring more of flexibility, and this flexibility is coming from the technology also. So the more flexible our environment becomes, the more adaptive it becomes, the more inclusive it becomes. So this is the stance that, you know, which I feel the policy is taken. Even in terms of language, it's removing barriers because it is talking about opening various courses, institutions in different regional languages and removing that barrier where learning becomes a barrier for any institution. Professor Joshi also belongs to CIE. I also belong to CIE. We have been students of CIE also. And we know that CIE in the beginning also had challenges and its own set of struggles with language, where, you know, Hindi medium students also used to be with us, English medium students were also with us, and both English and Hindi medium students had their own set of struggles. And CI always had that openness, you know, of accommodating both students from both mediums. CI is the Central Institute of Education in Delhi University. So we had different sections, you know, Hindi medium section, English medium sections. But there was also a point in CI when, you know, students wanted more flexibility, and we even started a bilingual section because many students preferred studying in bilingual mode also because they knew Hindi, but they wanted to write in English, or it's the other way around. They knew English, but they wanted to write in Hindi. So this ability of writing in one language, speaking in the other language also is there as a need in many of the learners, which also the policy is acknowledging. So language is not becoming a barrier for the learners. So that's another stance which the policy takes when it acknowledges these in its fundamental principles. Now, moving on to the next slide, which also talks about 3-4 important points which are there in the policy. It acknowledges the huge diversity, which I have already discussed, and it will again come in the other slides also. That's a very important point because the kind of diversity, multi-layered diversity that Indian population has is not found in any other country, the way it surfaces in our country. So it acknowledges that. Most of the variations which we see in our population have been acknowledged in the policy. The second important point is this policy is very aptly aligned to the international perspective of inclusion, which is the Self-Development Goal 4, and to which India is also a signatory. In 2015. We had signed that commitment. So it's an international commitment, and the policy begins with this commitment. So it not only is local in its perspective, but also global in its perspective, in the sense that it remembers the commitment and is aligned itself to the international changes which are taking place with respect to inclusion. Other than that, it contends that education is a fundamental right and its vital role. That's very important. Education is always seen as one of the instrument, you know, to get job. Its instrumental role in getting a job, in making my future, or in getting me married. These are very common instrumental roles to which we generally attach education to. But the view of policy is much larger. It sees that how education at large can bring changes in the society. And the changes are in terms of equity, social justice, social and economic mobility. So it gives that role to the education. And while stating that, it also talks about that education has to be quality education. And within the quality education, one of the most important, of course, parameters that it makes is inclusive education. So quality and inclusive education, it sees as having important significance. So it doesn't stop at education as a fundamental right only, that I get my right and that's enough for me. That right further gives me the right to get married or right to get a job. The policy doesn't stop at that point. It goes beyond that. It says that it is a fundamental right, but the right should also come with quality education. Other than that, it also recommends the education system to focus on all kinds of exclusionary practices that have been happening till now, because inclusion cannot be understood till we understand exclusion. And these exclusionary processes are not I'll say they are not unidirectional processes. They are very complex. They are multi-directional, multi-dimensional processes, and they are all historically embedded in the past of Indian education system. And that need to be understood, because its implications are what we are seeing in today's education system. So what we call as disadvantage, we very easily say that this group is disadvantaged, these are marginalized, but who are they? And what is their background? So the policy in the chapter 6 very specifically says that we need to understand them. We need to understand why they are disadvantaged, why they are marginalized. And there are multiple factors also it talks about. It talks about double disadvantage also, which has been acknowledged in theory for a long time. It also talks about, at the same time, underrepresentation of many communities. Although their individuals may have got included in the urban setups or in the dominant classes, but the community itself is not getting included in the society. So the inclusion also itself is not a very simple ideology or a concept to engage with. It also has its limitations, I would say, which the policy, I feel, is aware of. So at one time, it is talking about inclusion of the individuals, but on the other hand, it is also talking about the inclusion of communities, because social mobility may lead to the inclusion of individuals. But inclusion of communities is also important. When the individuals get socially mobilized, their communities tend to perish. They may perish away. So that danger also somewhere, I feel, has been pointed out in the policy, for which we need to see that how it has some provisions in the other chapters which get aligned to this idea that how to sustain many of the communities of artisans, many of the communities who have their traditional practices and still they cling on to their traditional mode of professions. Also, it talks about quality education, which I've already mentioned, which means that by inclusive education, the policy expects that the way education is being done, that also improves. So it goes into the finer details of curriculum and pedagogy also, rather than simply talking about while talking about inclusion, it doesn't simply talk about the entry. So in inclusion, we generally talk about 3 E's. Those 3 E's are not written in the policy as such, because they are a part of the theories, but they have their representation in the policy. The 3 E's are, the first E, of course, is the entry. So an individual is getting entry into the education system. But what about the other E? The second E is the engagement. And the third E is the empowerment. So entry, engagement, and empowerment. Entry is definitely, somebody had written very well in the question answer box that inclusion is not merely legal provisions. Very right. Inclusion is not merely legal provisions, because even if we have legal provisions, we may not abide by them. That is one thing. Even if we abide by them, we may give entry into the educational institution. But what about their engagement? What about their acceptance? So many of you had written in the chat box that the attitudinal barriers don't create that accepting atmosphere. And therefore, even if we have given the entry, we are not able to engage the learners, whether in school or in higher education. Both have their own sets of challenges and barriers. And the third is which is another important aspect, is empowerment, which of course comes from engagement only. So most of the policies have talked about entry. We have acts like RT Act 2009, which has majorly only focused on, in fact, school education, does talk about the entry, but of course it's an act, so it cannot go on talking about engagement in terms of pedagogy or curriculum. But that's how the policy then engages. Even the RPWD Act, which is the Rights of Persons with Disability Act 2016, which is the revised 2005 Act, also talks about the entry. But then, of course, we need a policy for the engagement, which this policy has now at several places in the policy talked about pedagogy, also talked about representing the various communities in the pedagogy and in the curriculum. So therefore, the ideological stance is somewhere which is larger than merely giving space to the communities who had been marginalized or had been excluded. Similarly, another 2 points which the policy I felt has taken one step forward from the, in fact, a leap forward from the previous policy, is because it does not talk of only Divyang. Divyang comes as one of the groups in that, but it talks of all the communities, all the disadvantaged groups, and therefore it talks of social inclusion and not just the inclusion of the disability. So that's another important point which the previous policy has not talked about and has focused majorly on the, that time they didn't call it Divyang, so majorly had focused on the people with disabilities. Other than that, it contends that the education system must aim to benefit India's children so that no child loses any opportunity to learn and excel because of circumstances of birth or background. This is a very important point, and it should actually change the vision of all of us, because once we have this kind of a stance, now the education system must benefit India's children. At least that shows that no child loses any opportunity to learn. It shows that the policy is not simply focusing on the learning of the child, but also it focuses on excelling them. Till now, our stance has always been that, India has a population which is a huge population. We are obviously second largest in the world. So the focus must be more on minimum levels of learning, and most population should be literate. Whether they are able to achieve their abilities, their qualities, their inherent abilities, that was not in focus. Now, this policy, whenever it talks of quality education, it means that every child should also excel in the kind of qualities that the person has or the child has. So it's not simply restricting a child's opportunities or a learner's opportunities to merely learning. Then all students, irrespective of their place of residence, must be provided a quality education system with particular focus on historically marginalized, disadvantaged and underrepresented groups. Appropriate initiatives to ensure that all students, despite inherent obstacles, are provided various targeted opportunities to enter and excel. This is something similar to what I was talking was the Academic Bank of Credit. So it provides several, and the years also have been extended to 8 years. I think this work is already going on. There are committees who are working on the credit system, and they are also deciding on the number of years in which these credits could be used. And as far as I've come to know, I mean, they're extended. Generally in a course, we have 4 to 5 years, but now they would have around 8 years. So I can't say it in a very tangible way because the work is still going on in terms of deciding on the credits also, and in terms of deciding on the number of years. But this kind of a flexibility gives more opportunity to the learners. Now coming on to the vision, the second part, which is the vision, the school education. Now, some of it we have already discussed also during when we were talking about these stands. Now, the vision in school education, of course, the first important thing that policy has done is that it has introduced the concept of socio-economically disadvantaged groups. So it's a very broader category, but it includes almost all the kinds of identities which are there in the country: gender identity, socio-cultural, geographical, disabilities, including learning disabilities, socio-economic conditions of migrant communities, income. I mean, these recognizing them and acknowledging them in the policy was also important, because the previous policies and acts have been somewhere leaving some or the other category behind. You know that in the RT Act 2009, it didn't mention the individuals with disabilities, and later on with an amendment in 2010 and 11 it was added. It had to be added, because if the policy does not mention, then generally what happens when it has to be implemented, it gives a loose end to the policy, and taking advantage of the loose end, or sometimes it may be because of the neglect or ignorance, that particular group gets left out. And this was happening after RT Act 2009, where many of the people who were working in the area of disability, in the disability studies, and many of them who were themselves impaired, had specifically raised voice that it should be included in RT Act, and then an amendment was made for the same purpose. So this concept of socially economically disadvantaged groups, what its implications are. Now, once we are able to recognize these groups, of course, it has to be empirically done, taking the data from different states, and some data has already been taken for the purpose of the policy, which has showed that the enrollment rate, of course, is low in these groups, and that's why they have been included also. But in the case, the females in such groups are further having a low enrollment rate, which also shows that, again, as I was talking about, that it refers to the double disadvantage also. So it sees that one identity within another identity creates a larger disadvantage than being into one of the groups only. So it discovers that correlation also, and therefore is well informed by the theoretical shifts or changes which are taking place in inclusion. The policy observes that the disadvantage is more noticeable at higher levels of education also, in higher education also. Then multiplicity of factors also it takes care of. It acknowledges that there is a lack of access to quality schools. What is the distance at which various schools are located? What are the number of schools located in a particular area? Poverties also is one of the factors, of course, the social mores, the customs that a particular community has, language. So it acknowledges that other than these groups, there are other factors also which have created this kind of a disadvantage. So of course, it envisions that the gaps which are there in terms of access, participation, and and in terms of the learning outcomes, that those gaps have to be reduced. And you already know that work in terms of learning outcomes have been already going on in higher education, also in school education also. The curriculum is made in terms of learning outcomes, which to a large extent shows that what is a learner achieving at the end of a particular level of education. And other than that, of course, access and participation. Then it acknowledges the other backward classes also. It also acknowledges that the tribal communities, children from scheduled tribes face advantages at multiple levels due to various historical and geographical factors. Also, it recognizes that since the tribal communities and their culture don't find representation in school education, hence their children often find it irrelevant and foreign to their lives, both culturally and academically. So that is another very important point. As I said, that in CI also, we had many students who were coming from the backgrounds where only Hindi was spoken. and really in the earlier years, there was a dominance of English speaking students. In higher education also, you imagine language could create those kinds of barriers. And the B.Ed students, our B.Ed students who used to speak Hindi, they used to feel a lot of inhibition. Many of them were bold, one or two of them definitely were bold enough to counter. But there were many who were facing inhibitions because of language also. So, of course, individual's role is also there, but the institutional ethos also has to be challenged and changed in order that we make the individual feel accepted in the community. So our institution had also, I mean, I can quote it as an example, we also evolved over a period of time, and now our Hindi medium students are not only par with the English medium students, but they are doing in fact better than the English medium students, although still there are challenges in terms of the reading materials, in terms of books, which are largely written in English. We have in some subject areas, we have few in Hindi. So such disparities in terms of language, in terms of availability of resources, access to resources, all these have been acknowledged, and they have to be taken up at a national level so that these disparities can be minimized. I can't say completely removed, but should be minimized to a large extent. Similarly, the special mention of children with special needs and the importance of creating enabling mechanisms for providing them the same opportunities of obtaining quality education as any other child. So for the young children also, they are creating platforms, technology equipped platforms, which are very enabling in the sense that they can access is provided they of course have the gadgets, they are able to access it themselves. So that also is a very important resource for the young children. And also it is seen that whatever resources are being made, they should be made in multiple ways, not only simply in visual mode, but also in audio mode, so that those who are not able to see, they can use the audio mode, and similarly those who can't hear can use the visual mode. So the multiplicity of mode in which the resource is being created, that also is very important. And therefore in platforms like MOOCs and many other platforms which have been started by NEPTEL also, like for example, they have been seeing that these multiple modes are used. In fact, many of the OERs in which Dr. Anjali was also involved, we had created many OERs for NCT during the pandemic. And there also we have given the same, those were for the higher educational learners, basically for the B.Ed students and the M.Ed students, but those resources were also created in different modes. So now the platforms are available with every organization, whether it's CBSE or it's NIUS, they are meant to do, IGNOU, or it's even NCT, which was seen having a very administrative role, is coming into an academic role also, and making these resources available to the learners. So one, of course, reason was pandemic also, but yes, otherwise also the work on MOOCs has been going on since the last 10 years in different ways by IIT also and IIMs also. And then eventually, of course, different universities have also taken up. So that, although it also has its own limitations, but one advantage that I see is that the accessibility and the kind of exchange, academic exchange, which is possible amongst the higher education learners. The concept of socially economically disadvantaged groups, some of the recommendations which it gives in this regard is identifying and strengthening the existing policies and schemes, undertaking research to assess the effectiveness of various measures for SEDGs, identifying special education zones. It also has acknowledged that there could be some special education zones also, those geographical areas where there are larger proportions of such groups available. So SEDGs, the social economically disadvantaged groups, were not enough, but there are certain geographical regions where more such groups are found. So they have to be all the more separately identified as special education zones, and more intensive and concentrated effort have to be put in there. Somebody like in the chat box had mentioned about equity. You know, here comes equity. We need to identify who needs what. We all don't need the same, but we all need to be at the same platform at one point of time. So for that, it is important that we identify how the needs are different. So special education zones is another important idea which needs to be implemented, and I don't know, it has to be, a roadmap has to be created that how do we identify such zones, and in such a way that many of these zones don't get missed out also. All of them get representation through the policy. And free boarding facilities in the school. So the policy recognizes various challenges that students might be facing in relation to the various factors that affect their access to school. So many students may not have a school nearby, and especially the girls. So the policy offers that free boarding. So many of the Navodaya Vidyalayas, they are saying could be upgraded into a residential school. So that is also one recommendation which is given. Then other than that, it also talks of conserving the insights and practice from the alternative schools. Now, in terms of school education, it is very important, because inclusive pedagogy, when we talk about in schools, it is not going to come de novo. It cannot simply arise from nowhere. It has to come from the insights which have been already there. And as I told in the beginning, when I go into a special school and I go into a so-called mainstream school, as we used to say it before the policy, the mainstream, the sensitivity, the pedagogy, and the practices which were followed by, the special schools were far more effective. Why? Because they were catering to diverse group of children. They always thought that they are catering to diverse children. And teachers like us who teach in general education system, we think that our group may be heterogeneous, but only in terms of ability, right? We may not be focusing more on their limitations, on their impairments, if they are impaired, or other challenges which come from their context. So in special schools, especially with respect to the children with impairment, I saw that they had more sensitivity and more responsive they were towards the needs of the children. So the kind of insights and practices which have been developed in special schools or in alternative schools are very useful for being included into the inclusive school. So if we think of developing inclusive pedagogy, it should come from these alternative schools. This is also what policy acknowledges, which I feel is a very important point. It might appear to be a very minor point, but it is very important, because in the name of inclusive pedagogy or inclusive practices, we may be doing many things, but how do we know that what we are doing is relevant or valid? What has been done in the alternative school has been done since many years, and it is well established practices. So those need to be borrowed and taken into the general education system, which also the policy says. Provisioning for children with disabilities. Of course, this provisioning, it has talked in different ways. I'll not go into the details because we all have somewhere read the policy. So it is talking about the children with learning disabilities, because it acknowledges that children with learning disabilities have been at a disadvantage because of many reasons, have not got that representation. And the policy truly recognizes all the acts, RPWD Act or RT Act, for giving reference to school education or for giving a reference of children with impairments. Then the vision for higher education, what the policy has to say about higher education. Now, one important thing is that our previous policies have not gone into the inclusiveness or the challenges which higher education institutions have been facing. So there is idea of exclusion, there is idea of disparity in higher education also, but it's very different from school education. And this is what policy recognizes. One important point that policy makes is that which is a very pragmatic outlook towards higher education, is that the availability of number of higher education institutions in a particular area. That is definitely an important point, which we need to see that which regions do not have or have very few higher education institutions. That creates a kind of exclusion for the higher education learners. The second important point that this policy makes is that the fee structure of higher education institutions, and there is, again, we know is there is a big disparity between the government-run institutions and the private-run institutions, and the cost of higher education is also that high that many of our learners are forced to drop out from the system. So considering that it talks about suitable government funds should be earmarked for the education of SEDGs. So again, a special focus is on the social economic disadvantaged groups with a clear target of what the gross enrollment ratio we are setting for them. Then it also talks about the gender balance in the admissions to HEs and access by establishing more high quality higher education institutions in the aspirational districts and the special education zones. So establishing new higher education institution is a very important step. Then high quality higher education institution that teach in local Indian languages or bilingually. This already the work has been already started, and many Indian languages have been introduced also. More financial assistance and scholarships to be given to the students or learners of the SEDGs. Then apart from that, outreach programs on higher education opportunities should be conducted, and the development of technology tools. So this we have mostly covered when we are talking about MOOCs, or we are talking about the online educational resources, open educational resources, which offers opportunities for the learners of different universities to take up courses from different other universities, university other than their own university. And then it gives some specific suggestions to the higher education institutions. Now, these again include the cost and the fees, as I was talking about, and the financial assistance, creating higher education opportunities, making the admission processes more inclusive. Now, this also is being talked about because now that the credit system will come, so the admission will not remain a one-time process, because a learner who has left a course and is trying to rejoin the next course in the next course which he or she is eligible for, then it needs to be seen that the admission process of different universities, how flexible it is to take up the students of other university at that particular entry point. So admission processes also have to be made more flexible in order that multiple entry points have to be created. If you are creating exit points, then those exits would create a need of entry to some other institution at some other point of time. So therefore, how the admission process would be made inclusive is very important, because it has more implications for those learners who cannot continue their education year after year, who may need to drop out from the system for a year or so for some or the other reason and rejoin it. It will have a lot of implications for admissions, and this requires, I think, more clarity also, although some work is going on because I'm in touch with that particular committee, but it requires more clarity in terms of eligibility also, because even if the seat is there, suppose the seat is there in the university, what eligibility would be set so that it is then uniform for the entire university, at least that university, or it may be uniform for all the universities. So these are big questions that also need to be answered. We need to seek answers for them, because creating a common higher education system is not a simple task. It's actually a Herculean task where we are creating multiple exits and multiple entry points across the country. But at the same time, it is required also considering the diversity in our country and considering the kind of mobility that our learners have been showing since many years. So that means that they are ready to move on from one university to another as per their need and as per the way they are able to access it. Then, of course, making curriculum more inclusive, this also requires a lot of deliberations. I have been conducting, because I'm also, Delhi University has an institute for lifelong learning. So lifelong learning itself is one of the mandates that the policy gives. So a very important aspect of it is that higher education teachers are also really struggling with how to make the curriculum more inclusive. Now, this demand is also not new for them. They have been struggling because now the higher education institutions have become inclusive spaces. So I think we need more deliberations to evolve such curriculum. In Delhi University, we have revised our curriculum on the basis of learning outcomes. Before that, we had also made it credit-based. Then we revised it on the basis of learning outcomes also. And we saw that it requires a lot of deliberations and a lot of time also. So that amount of time and energy has to be invested by the teachers, and the involvement of teachers is very important in that process, because it's the teachers, after having seminars and some courses that we have organized where there we had deliberations with them, we felt that their inputs are very important because it's the realities from the field comes with them. So engagement of higher education teachers in all these steps is very important. Then developing more degree courses taught in Indian languages that we have already discussed, and buildings, facilities, how they could be made accessible and disabled friendly. Similarly, there are some suggestions related to the bridge courses also, provide socio-emotional and academic support and mentoring for the students, ensure sensitization of faculty. These points I don't need to repeat because all of us understand to a large extent. So for higher education, I can say that the policy definitely goes beyond school education, and that is also one important point, that higher education is in focus in this policy. Secondly, it gives specific suggestions for macro level where governments are advised to review and ensure the issues of access, quality and availability. So this review is also very important, which should happen time to time, but how and who is going to take up the review is another important point, because even there is going to be a big change in the higher education structure also. So that also is awaited. Once it gets its roadmap, only then we can think of that how these processes would be possible. So some of the concluding thoughts that from the policy itself, from its stance and vision, I get is that it is definitely, if I say from the perspective of inclusion, it is a detailed discourse on inclusive education, no doubt about it. Its stances and its vision is as broad as it could be possible. Yes, implementation definitely requires a lot of more work to be done. The part of policy related to inclusion has been conscripted using appropriate rationale. Here and there, all rationale is being given. They have also referred to researchers, acts, theoretical ideas. It's aligned to the international perspective. And as compared to the previous policy, it is definitely based on the broader idea of inclusion. It reiterates at several places, specifically in the context of children with severe disabilities, that education of all children is the responsibility of the state. So that is a very important submission that the policy makes at several places, and that is very important for all the educators and educational institutions to understand. The policy has therefore sensitively and comprehensively given its recommendations, but it requires a detailed plan for its implementation, and it should happen at various levels and in various ways. So that some sketches of roadmap do come in, but a detailed roadmap in this perspective is required. But the positive point, of course, is that at least all this has got acknowledged, which was not there in the previous policies in this way. So with this, I stop here, and these are simply my concluding thoughts on the policy, what I have gathered from the policy. But I would now open it and would like to hear from all of you. Thank you. So I'll stop my presentation, and we can have your observations, comments, or your questions in the box.
Yes, in the chat box. Yes. I think participants, one request is there, ma'am. Can you please share the last slide once again?
Okay, I'll do that. Yes.
Shweta Singh is thanking you for sharing again.
Okay. Shweta.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So there is another question. Ma'am, if you can see that I want to clarification between integration and inclusion by Rana Saeed.
Okay, this is a question.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Rana Saeed, your question is the difference between inclusion and integration, which I had in between shared also, but I'll repeat that. So, when the idea of inclusion came, with the human rights, and then it was that we started accepting people from different contexts, maybe disability or gender or caste. But before that, we were keeping these individuals from different contexts segregated from the society in different ways, So segregation was an idea where it was felt that they should be kept separated in the society, whether in terms of school or in terms of higher education. Higher education, it never surfaced in, because they never used to reach to higher education levels. They were always in the school only. From school education only, there was a dropout. So different schools were created for them. Like, for example, special schools were created, and they were kept separately. Now, when 1986 policy, although 68 policy had also talked about integration, but when 1986 policy came, it came after the human rights. And therefore, there was a commitment towards giving human rights to all individuals of the country. And it was that time when 86 policy was forced to bring in these children in the general schools. But the idea which 1986 policy has written most of its recommendations, if you see the policy, it basically says that if the child can fit into the mainstream school, I mean, this is the kind of language which is used, should be given in entry into the mainstream school. If it is not able to, then the child should be prepared for the school. So this is integration. When we are preparing a child to enter the school without changing the school or without changing any educational institution, then it is integration. But where we are changing the educational institution so that every child can fit in, that is inclusion. This is the major difference. So in integration, we are not accepting the diversity. We are trying to create uniformity, because our school is only of one kind and all children who are similar would fit into that. But in inclusion, we are accepting diversity and therefore making our institution more flexible, rather than making all learners uniform in every sense. So that is the main difference. Other than that, of course, in integration, the onus is on the individual because you're changing the individual. So the individual has to work hard. Whereas in inclusion, the onus is on the state because the state has to change its institutions so that the diversity which is there in the country could be included. I hope I have made it clear.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am, for answering the question.
You're welcome.
And there are some other points also. If okay. Dr. Shweta is saying, how will these measures impact university education?
How this?
How
Yes.
will these measures impact university education?
Yes.
And Dr. Preeti, Dr. Shalender, Dr. Shankara, they all are praising for the session, that it was a very informative session, very nice presentation.
Thank you very much for your kind comments. I really appreciate. Dr. Shweta, that's a very good question. How it's going to impact the university education? It's really a very good and a very significant question for the coming years. See, I can only preempt, I can only anticipate right now because some of the committees which are working for these changes, I am in touch with some of them. So that's how I know, like, for example, I mentioned about the credit, the academic bank credit. Now, most of the universities have to decide. One thing is that credits for all their courses. So all the courses would have credits to it. Many of the universities have already under CBCS scheme revised also their courses. The other thing is most of the universities have to become more open to other universities, to exchanges with other universities. Now, these days, we have seen over the years, universities have lived in their own niches, So even I can talk about Delhi University, Delhi University lives in its own, as if we have no exchange with other universities. But in the coming years, if we have credit policies, we will see students from other state universities coming into the central universities, bringing their credits and completing their eligibility criteria and getting a place in our university. So that kind of a change, and therefore I see that the diversity within universities which further going to increase. Although central universities still have a lot of diversity, like Delhi University is a central university, it's very diverse. We have learners from Northeast, we have learners from Bihar, we have down south, from the west part of the country. We have a lot of diversity, but now I think even the state universities would have a lot of diversity because they are going to open up. And as I said, the admission and the examination processes would be impacted a lot, because if we need to have, for example, if a university opts for MOOCs, if you become a host institute for MOOCs, then you also have to conduct examination for all the learners who are opting for your MOOCs. So conducting examination for the learners who do not belong to your university, that also is going to bring a lot of change in your examination system. So right now, like being a part of IIIL, we were working for bringing MOOCs into the Delhi University. Many of the universities already have. So we had a interaction with them also. So there we saw that policy also strongly recommends that MOOCs should become part of most of the universities. So there then the examination system will also undergo change. We would have a separate examination branch who would look into these assessment of the online courses. So in the coming years, definitely, Dr. Shweta, we will see that our universities would become more open, more flexible. This is what I'm gauging. They would become more technologically equipped, which we have already become due to pandemic also to a large extent, and otherwise also we were updating ourselves. So, and therefore the diversity is going to definitely increase. In our classrooms, we may have learners from the previous batch, and we may have a learner who just entered from another university. So that would bring a major change. I hope this is what I can anticipate.
Yes, thank you, ma'am, for answering the question. There is one more question from Dr. Naresh. He is asking that are there any UGC guidelines regarding the implementation of national education policy?
Implementation, how is Dr. Naresh, no, there are no UGC guidelines till now for implementation of NEP. DU has a committee on NEP. Every university, I suppose, has a committee for implementation of NEP. So Delhi University has also made a committee, and that committee is planning from the last 7 to 8 years. Sorry, from the last 7 to 8 months.
8 months.
Yeah,
Yes.
sorry. From the last 7 to 8, since the policy in July had come last year, since then, this committee is working on it. And because Delhi University is a huge university, so the committee is also a very big committee which has representation from, because we have many colleges also, we have around more than 80 departments. So it has representation from all disciplinary areas and all kinds of institutions that we have. And the plan is still in the making. We haven't come out with any specific plan till now.
Yes, and I think all the universities they have made, the competent authorities has made the committees, and they are working towards that how these guidelines of the NEP can be implemented in the universities. So I think it is in I think we are all in the same sync, that we all are working together, that how these things can be implemented.
That's true. True.
Yes.
We are in the same boat. How
Yeah.
could ideas be validated also, Dr. Naresh is asking. Yes, Dr. Naresh, that's a valid question. I think some mechanism has to be, because, right now, even UGC, we all know that even the higher education, the 4 pillars which have to be created as per the new education policy. So the revamping of the higher education also is underway. So I don't know, in this capacity, UGC also cannot issue anything right now. UGC itself is getting subsumed in the other bodies. But I think because HECI is the higher education commission, which is to be, so those meetings were also held in, Delhi University was also invited to be part of it when the higher education structures were being planned. So those proposals also have been given by Delhi University, but again, we don't have we can't share that plan right now because it's still is in the finalization process. It's getting finalized. So once the HECI plan gets finalized and I think it gets implemented, after that only we would be able to think that which body will have this role of validating the ideas and seeing that whether NEP is being implemented in a valid way or not. So we need to wait for.
Yes.
Yes.
We have to wait for that. Truly, I also agree with your point. And some other faculty members like Dr. Seema Sharma, Arshia Rai, they are also praising the session. Sakshi Virmani, Shweta Singh, they all are appreciating for the session, that it was a very wonderful session.
Thank you.
And if you can take, ma'am, one more question.
Yes,
It is from Dr. Umakant Prasad. He is asking, sometimes we talk about the partial inclusion. Is the approach is worse than special education when we talk about children with disabilities?
Where is this question?
In the chat box only.
Okay. Partial inclusion.
454 timing.
454. Okay, sometimes we talk about partial inclusion. Is the approach worse than special education when we talk about children with disabilities? It's again a very good question, Dr. Umakant. Yes, it's a very good question. In fact, in principle, I totally agree with what you are saying. Partial inclusion is definitely detrimental and is definitely worse than special education. Special education or special schools, after the 1986 policy came, it gave this loose end that wherever the children cannot go to school, they should be put in separate schools, and they were put in separate schools, and therefore these special schools were created. And that time nobody was there to take the onus of special schools also. It was only then in 1992 that RCI was created, Rehabilitation Council of India, which then further made programs for training the teachers who could teach in special schools. But special schools never came into the purview of the mainstream, even in the assessment also, means CBSE was not conducting a uniform examination for special school as it was conducting for the other schools, which this policy recommends. It says that even if children who are homeschooled, because they are not able to move, some of the children have muscular dystrophy or they have cerebral palsy, they are bedridden, so they cannot in any case go to school. So the policy does talk about those children, of course, would be homeschooled. But it says that some mechanism should be devised, that that these children could be also involved in the same assessment process which other children go or take. So Parak, they have the policy recommends Parak as one of the assessment organizations that should be started, and within that, even the homeschool children should be brought in. So this is what policy says. Now, coming to Dr. Umakant's question is that what I was trying to say is that special schools, since 30-40 years, nobody has took their onus, but they kept working in their own domain, and they have evolved many insights, many practices, many pedagogies, which are really responsive to the needs of special children. And therefore, if a parent, many of the parents ask me, if a child had Down syndrome, and the parent asks me that, where should I put, and parents, generally, because they feel it's a social stigma, they want that their children should go into a general school only, without understanding this also, that is the general school ready for your child? It's not ready. So that is what Dr. Umakant is saying. If the school is not ready, it just calls itself an inclusive school. But from inside, it doesn't know what resources a child with Down syndrome or a child with visual handicap would require. So that definitely is very detrimental for the child, because child will have lots of attitudinal issues also. Child will have, may not be accepted by the peer group, because the peer group is also not ready. The teachers are not ready. The school ethos is not prepared for it. But a special school would definitely do better, because there at least the child's needs would be fulfilled, would be understood. It would be a more accepting space for the child, right? So in comparison to partial inclusion, with partial inclusion, Dr. Umakant meant a school which calls itself inclusive school but is not prepared. So it gives entry to a child with impairment but doesn't do anything with the child. So in comparison to a partial inclusion, definitely a special school would be better. I totally agree with you, Dr. Umakant. But yes, our vision, but our aim should be full inclusion, and only we should have inclusive schools. Our special schools, our special education should subsume with the inclusive pedagogy and inclusive schools. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for answering the questions so patiently. And there are some more questions, if you can take. One is from Dr. Meenakshi Dwivedi. She is talking about NEP 2020 emphasized a lot upon inclusion in education, but is it say about special education, to what extent it will be in the education system? Because somewhere I feel that special education system does not want inclusive education to be flourished. Please throw some light, ma'am.
Yeah. Dr. Meenakshi, that's also a valid concern that you have raised, which is amongst the special educators, because special educators still don't agree with the idea of inclusion. I had conducted a research with Delhi school teachers regarding the idea of inclusion around 4-5 years back, and general school teachers are not ready because, they are not ready because they feel that they are not trained. That before 2-year B.Ed, our 1-year B.Ed never had a paper on inclusion. Right? It was just an elective we used to offer for special education. So teachers were not prepared for special education. So that's why the general education teachers, they simply denied the idea. Why? Because they said we are not prepared. If a child with visual handicap or visual impairment will be sitting in our classroom, I don't know what to do with the child. So that was a genuine concern. But on the other hand, what you said, that also came in our research, that many of the special educators said that special children cannot be taught in the inclusive schools. Right. And therefore, they also didn't agree with the inclusive because they cannot imagine a school to evolve into an inclusive school where those intensive needs, I would say, unique but intensive needs of the learners could be met. So definitely it's a difficult task. It's a challenging task. It is a challenging task, because we have already divided our society. From the last 100 years, we have divided it. Now we again want to integrate it in such a way that it becomes inclusive. So therefore, it would take time, and these apprehensions are very valid if the educators have. So it is difficult, but it is the only way in which we can give justice to people who have been out of the system. And your question about NEP, yes, NEP only talks about inclusive education. It does not talk about special education, but it gives emphasis on special education. As my presentation also said, it says that the insights and practices from special education should be taken into the inclusive education system. We should learn from them. So when it talks about alternative schools, it talks about special schools also. And that is where, that is what the theory also says. Inclusive pedagogy is no new pedagogy. It is actually the amalgamation of the general pedagogy, which we have been doing till now, and the pedagogy insights that we can get from the special education. So 10 years back, even I used to teach the paper which I teach, the specialization course that I teach in CI. It also used to be called as special education. So we also revised it 10 years back, and we have now brought it under the umbrella of inclusion, and we now call it as inclusive education. So theory has also evolved, policy is also evolving, and gradually, of course, praxis or our practice would also evolve. This is what I can say. Yes.
Yes. I think the Umakant, no, I think this is the question from Dr. Meenakshi. I think you got the response, Dr. Meenakshi, and ma'am, you have well taken all the questions of the participants, and they have written in the chat box. I think you have covered all the questions which were asked, and you answered very patiently. So thanks for that, and thanks a lot for enlightening us with all the aspects pertaining to the National Education Policy 2020, equity and inclusion in higher education. You rightly examined the ideological stance and vision of National Education Policy 2020 from the perspective of inclusion. You have rightly remarked that the implementation of policy is far different from the vision. Moreover, the ideological stance, including the fundamental principles you have shared, of high significance. So we really appreciate for that. And the phase you practice in the session have conducted very nicely. You have talked about the integrative mainstream education and the importance of one system of education. So that was also very appreciable. And Moreover, you have rightly highlighted the difference between the integration and inclusion and have introduced the international changes as remarked by National Education Policy 2020. So at the end of this session, I would like to thank you for taking such a wonderful session on the behalf of University School of Education, Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University. And I also thanks to all the participants for remaining focused throughout the session and also participating in the session by having discussions in between and by writing the comments and by asking the questions. So thank you once again to all the participants and Professor Yukti Sharma for taking such a wonderful and informative session. So thank you. Thank you once again, ma'am.
Thank you,
And-
Dr. Anjali, for your kind words and for having me over. You know, in fact, you very rightly said that the participants are really focused. You know, the kind of responses they gave during the session and also the kind of questions that have come up are very relevant and very crucial questions for which we all would be finding answers in the coming years. So,
Yeah.
I would
And
once
thank
again congratulate you for conducting this very well conceptualized FDP program, and I hope all the participants would be really benefited. I learned a lot from all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for for giving the motivation to us. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, all of you, and take care. Stay safe. Can I leave
Yeah.
now, Dr. Anjali?
Yes, ma'am. You can leave now. I think we have come to the end of the session, and we all are leaving now. Just one information I want to tell all the participants that tomorrow again we will be meeting at 1 o'clock for the next session and for having a new learning on the new topic. So till then, bye-bye and take care. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
And we are ending the session. Thank you, everyone.